This is the Turn Your Life Around podcast, and I'm the 180 lady. I've been helping people turn their lives around since 2007 as the founder and CEO of a large mental health company. The purpose of this podcast is to have meaningful conversations with old friends and new friends, everyday people just like you and me, about how they turn their lives around. We'll discuss all things mental health, fitness, finances, relationships, parenting, spirituality, you name it. My hope is that you can take something away that will encourage you today. I'm your host, Sarah Coates. Are you ready to turn your life around? Thanks for listening to the podcast today. Thanks for joining. We have an exciting guest. I'm going to introduce Mr. Jon Frey. He is a person in 12-step recovery, but we are here also to talk about, he is the founder of Oakwood 24 and other endurance events. This is going to be a really exciting episode, and thanks so much for joining us, Jon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I know you have a really great story of turning life around, which is the focus of the podcast. So I'm excited for you to be able to share with the audience just the different points in your life where you've turned things around, and especially, want to talk about Oakwood 24 and your endurance events that you're promoting and initiating. So if you will, just kind of share with the audience a little bit about where you come from, how you got started, just a little bit of your life story.
Yeah, so I grew up in kind of eastern North Carolina most of my life. I grew up over in Wilson, North Carolina, and went to high school there, and went to school up at Appalachian State University, and I've been back in Raleigh for most of my adult life. And that's also where I went through the recovery program that kind of changed the trajectory of my life, Healing Transitions. It's down there on Dorothea Dix campus.
Yeah. So you grew up in Wilson?
I did.
Yeah. That's a small town.
It is. It's used to be a very small town back when I was there. I graduated high school back in 2000, and it's changed a lot, but it was a good place to grow up for sure.
Yeah. So if you will, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your addiction story and how you got from there to here.
Yeah. So I guess it kind of starts back at a very early age, kind of looking back, hindsight. I think a lot of it was based in fear when I was younger. I think I was kind of born with that kind of fear of people, places, things, social situations, obsession with how other people viewed me and things like that. It kind of, I think, may have been the alcoholic gene in me, or kind of just set me up for that. So instead of kind of learning to cope with those things, I was introduced kind of at an early age, mainly from my older brother and his friends, to substances and alcohol that kind of changed the way I felt and kind of numbed some of that. So, early on in high school, maybe late middle school, I was, already started to use alcohol a little bit. And I was kind of a misfit from the beginning. Like, they say that a lot of alcoholics, that we feel like the rules didn't apply to us. And I was kind of the same way. I knew right from wrong, but I was also in my teenage years, like stealing stuff from stores, shoplifting, tobacco products, that kind of thing. So generally just kind of that the rules are there, but they don't really apply to me kind of thing. So, but just going through middle school, it just started off, I feel like a lot of my friends were doing the same things, just sneaking alcohol occasionally, marijuana use, things like that. And then that kind of set me up for, this, and instead of going through all these feelings, it was a way for me to escape.
Yeah. To numb those feelings, those hard feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting. I have two teenagers of my own. I've worked with adolescents in the mental health field for almost 20 years. I often say kids just really, they need to have a group of belonging, right? And sometimes, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday at lunch, actually. If it's sports, if it's band, if it's theater, if it's something that they have a group of people who accept them and they can join in and have like-minded ideas and activities. But then there are some people, I think teenagers specifically, who don't have that. And so they find their group of belonging, and it's people who are, pushing them to do unhealthy things or lead them down the wrong path. So, where do you think you fit in with that as a middle schooler, as a teenager?
I think I was kind of in between because I did play a lot of high school sports and I was good at them, excelled in them. Loved playing baseball, soccer, and other
Mhm.
things. And school was pretty easy for me too. I could memorize things very easily, so I was pretty good academically as well.
Mhm.
Um, but it seemed at some point it seemed to focus on, it was kind of getting through the week, playing sports, going to school, doing all this stuff, and somehow the focus shift to always what we were doing that weekend, how we were going to get alcohol, things we were going to do like that. And unfortunately, a lot of the kids that I was playing sports with and doing all these things were also doing that on the weekends too. So at some point, it focused to that.
Yeah, definitely just influenced by the group you were
Hmm.
hanging around. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so middle school, high school, you were experimenting and getting into drugs and alcohol, it sounds like. And so what happened after high school?
Yeah, so you could tell early on that I had more of an issue with it than most people. I started getting underage drinking tickets in high
Mm.
school, and I think racked up quite a few of them. Um, and I remember I even had, I think I got one at a Dave Matthews concert at Walnut Creek
Yeah.
back when I was probably 15, 16, something like that. And I got sentenced by a Wake County judge to
Oh.
go to a certain amount of AA meetings and take notes on it and things like that. And
At
um,
15 or 16?
yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I think I had to go to like 10 meetings and write a page paper about it, all of them. And
Mhm.
even I remember that judge telling me that I already had a problem and that I needed to do something about it, or it was going to, drastically affect my life moving forward. And back then you couldn't tell me anything. I just kind of dismissed it and kept on
Right.
moving.
Wow.
Um, but anyways, yeah. So I started having issues like that. I got, caught drinking and driving some in a small town in Wilson. Back then, it wasn't that big of a deal, so it was kind of like a slap on the wrist
Mm.
kind of thing. But it just kind of, as most people know, it's a progressive disease. So as I went into college and started experimenting with different drugs and harder drugs and things like that, things got worse and worse. And I still did well in college. Graduated with a business degree from Appalachian State.
Mhm.
But it was still always that, what am I going to do to get through this week? So when Thursday afternoon hits, it's on, and the focus was more on the weekend stuff and the partying than it was on anything else.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like that was just kind of a pattern from your childhood. Maybe trying to escape what was going on during the week and looking forward to relaxing on the weekend.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think from an alcoholic's perspective, and I've heard other people talk about it, it's kind of like that daily ritual. Like, what do I have to do during this day or this morning to get through work so I can kind of drink into oblivion in the afternoon? And that's what it turned into. Eventually, is that daily battle of,
Mm.
what do I have to do to get this to make it so nobody will bother me and I can just sit around and kind of do what I want to.
Yeah, like you said, progressive disease. So
Mhm.
you graduated from App State. Obviously, you're still using. What was your, substance of choice, drug of choice at that point?
I think it always kind of started and ended with alcohol
Yeah.
mainly. But I got into all sorts of hard drugs,
Mhm.
cocaine, all sorts of pills. I like to combine all sorts of combinations of them was kind of like the perfect thing for me. Um, and got real lucky. I had some overdoses. I had some scary times where I was hospitalized several times. And the further I got into my alcoholism, it started to take effect on my body more and more.
Mm.
I got into the point where I started having alcohol withdrawal symptoms and
Wow.
seizures, and I'd wind up in the hospital from having a bad seizure from lack of alcohol. Usually on Sunday mornings when I couldn't
Mm.
buy alcohol or something like that is when it would occur. So um, at some point, I figured out that on the weekends and stuff, it was drinking in the morning was one thing, but after I was out of college, had a somewhat decent career going, I figured out that I could take a drink in the morning and it would kind of calm those nerves and I wouldn't be sweaty and shaky and things like that. But it also started this bad process. Once you start drinking, an alcoholic does, you have to keep
Right.
drinking mainly all day long. So it's kind of
Mm.
sneaking it, drinking at lunch, those kind of things. But when I really went downhill was when I started drinking in the morning before work.
Mm.
Usually vodka and things like that that I didn't think people could smell as much, which was looking back on was just kind of insane. Like I can drink vodka in the morning and nobody's going to smell it on me throughout the day, kind of thing. But it just spiraled on after that to where I ended up having a bad car accident. That was like my fourth DWI. Injured some people, lost that job. Everybody found out. And then my life just kind of spiraled out of control into this hopeless state where I knew I was an alcoholic. I didn't care.
Mm.
I didn't know if I wanted to die or keep going. Kind of suicidal
Yeah.
part of my life where I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to drink myself to death kind of thing. So
And you were
um,
how old at that point?
this would have been my early 30s, early to
Uh-huh.
mid 30s.
So, and then you ended up at Healing Transitions. So tell us about how you got from that point, the suicidal despair, to Healing Transitions.
Yeah, so I guess it was a combination of things like legal troubles.
Mm.
I'd been in and out of jail several stints, nothing long. I'd never been in prison or anything, but I was terrified of being kind of locked up, and I wouldn't even go to certain detoxes and things like that if they had some kind of system to where I wasn't allowed to get up and leave when I wanted to. So, but anyways, I hit this kind of jumping off point that a lot of people call it, where alcohol and the drugs just didn't work. I used to get some relief out of it. Like, when I started drinking, or when I was drunk, it would be like a calming sense. But I got to this point where when I was drunk or when I was sober, I was completely scared, confused, kind of didn't know what was going on. And the alcohol and drugs just didn't really work anymore. So I was at this road of either I'm going to get some help or I'm going to, or I'm going to die or do something like that. And I was
Mm.
pretty close to it. When I talked to the doctors, I was 35 years old, didn't have anything wrong with me except for being an extreme alcoholic, and my liver and kidneys and everything were starting to fail, and all sorts of bad,
At 35.
yeah,
Wow.
extremely high blood pressure and seizures and things like
Yeah.
that. So anyways, I was lucky enough. My brother had been in recovery for a long time. He's
Mm.
also an alcoholic and got sober in 1997. So I'd seen him go through, a rehab program and stay in Alcoholics Anonymous and do
Mm.
really well with his life and all that kind of thing. But I always thought I was somewhat different than him for some reason. I always, most people in recovery hit some point where they always think, well, they're different than me. I'm not like them. I'm special. They don't have this going on. They don't have that going on. That's kind of a reason that, I stayed out there drinking and doing all this stuff because I thought I was different. In actuality, is actually we're much more alike than we are different than
Mm.
everybody else. So, um, but anyways, I I was lucky enough to still have my parents around at that point, and they agreed to take me to Healing Transitions, and it was a very unique program that had an open door policy, which I liked, which was you can get up and walk out anytime you want. The door's
Mm.
always open, that kind of thing. You have to start the program over again, but
Okay.
you can leave anytime you want. So that's kind of what really lured me into that program. And I got dropped off that day in August of 2016. And just thinking I would stay there for a week or two to kind of get some people off my back. It was, a year long program, which at that point I couldn't really fathom.
Mm.
I was like, there's
Mhm.
no way I'm staying here for a year. But, anyways, that was kind of the turning point when I made a decision that, hey, I've had enough of this. I'm going to get some help.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. You said earlier when you first started down this path, middle school, high school, it was kind of to alleviate some of this fear, this angst on the inside, it sounded like. And then fast forward, you're 35 and it wasn't doing that for you anymore. It was creating some of that, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, it was. It was just, I mean, it had really quit working for me.
Yeah.
It was just kind of complete chaos and fear all the time,
Hmm.
and nothing comforting about any of it
Yeah.
anymore. So
So Healing Transitions helped you change your life. Tell us about that experience.
they did. So I got dropped off there and didn't really have anything. I had drinking myself out of jobs and cars and just about everything I had,
Hmm.
and I really think it took me to get to that point to just about lose everything in my life. So I just had some clothes and a suitcase and that kind of
Wow.
thing. Um, But it's an incredible program where they house you, they feed you, they do all this stuff for an entire year. For it's completely free. Also, there's no
Right.
insurance required or anything like that. It's supported by the taxpayers of Wake County and private donations and things like that. So I was able to start that program, and it's kind of like a boot camp for recovery
Mhm.
where you're forced to go to a lot of meetings every week. And I mean, a lot, like 12, 14 meetings a
Right.
week, 12-step meetings. You're forced to get a sponsor. You're kind of go through this recovery dynamics program where you actually work the steps of Alcoholics
Mhm.
Anonymous real slowly and real thoroughly. And, but it was just fantastic. And it's a completely peer run program. So it's not like you're going in and talking to anybody that's experts in medical fields or anything like that. Everybody that works there has been through the program before.
Okay.
So that's what made it really special and it gave me a lot of hope too. Like,
Mhm.
here's this guy that seems to have it figured out, has a lot going on. He's been sober for a year or 2 or 3 years, but he also went through this program before me and did the exact same thing I'm about to do. So that was kind of a
Like
big deal
leading
to me.
yeah, leading by example is sort of what it sounds like that those people do.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's cool. I didn't know that. That's interesting. I didn't know that about healing transitions. Okay, so you are like forever indebted to this organization, it seems.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, well, they kept me there for a year. And obviously, when you're that early in recovery, a lot of times you're not that pleasant of a person to be
Mm.
around. But they put up with all these people, and you're there with like, if you look at the whole men's program, there's a men's and a women's campus in Raleigh. They're separated and, probably 10, 12 miles apart. But, I was there with 175 other men all the time. And
Wow.
it's a homeless shelter, kind of with a recovery program attached to it.
Mhm.
So it's a very humbling place to be. You start off living in a shelter with like 100 guys in this one big room, bunk beds. You actually like when I was there, I was on a wait list and I had to sleep on the floor for the first 3 weeks that I was there.
No kidding.
Yeah,
And
on a
you
mat
didn't
on the
just
floor.
bolt. I mean, because you could freely have left, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And you
you could
chose to
have.
stay.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the way a lot of the people start the program down there is on a mat on the floor kind of thing.
Wow.
But you're allowed this free time during the day, and you have to go stand in line at the soup kitchen downtown to eat. That's how you get your meal, and they feed you breakfast and dinner, that kind of thing. So it's this whole process to kind of humble you down, break you down. Like you drink yourself into this situation, and you're gonna have to be humble and go through this and be grateful to this whole process and these people that support you. So
That's
um,
amazing. Wow. Okay, so you did that program, you stayed for the full year.
yeah, I did, and it was fantastic. After the first few weeks, when I really wanted to leave all the time, I was calling my brother and mom and being like, "This place is not for me. I want to go." And they're like, "Just stay for a couple more weeks." And after I got used to it a little bit, it wasn't that bad. It was shocking at first for somebody like me because there's a lot of people that have been through there from different backgrounds in prison and everywhere else, and I'd never been exposed to really kind of group living like that. So it was
Mhm.
it was very shocking to me. It was also really good for me. And I after the first 2 or 3 weeks, I really enjoyed the program. I was able to get a sponsor down there and work the steps and kind of start feeling better about myself
Yeah,
and make that decision like, hey, I can stay sober and this isn't that bad, and
right.
gave me a little bit of hope for sure. And
Yeah.
I stayed there for almost a whole year. The program is only, I'd say, 8 to 9 months long, but before you finish the program, you're required to take a job there to give back to the program.
Okay.
So they have like buildings and grounds people. And then I did this little 90-day stint in the planning room, which is where you go back and kind of facilitate classes for people that are first coming in and
Mhm.
teach them about the first 3 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and things like that. So
Okay, okay. And so when you wrapped up there, what year is this that you're wrapping up at Healing Transitions?
this would have been late summer of 2017.
Okay, okay. And then when you left there, where did you go? Like what happens after you're discharged or you're finished with the program?
Yeah, well, that's another good thing about it is to the official way to like silver, they call it silver chipping or kind of graduating from that program, but you have to be lined up in sober housing and you have to have a job before you leave Healing Transitions. So
Right.
In other words, you stay there every night until you have a job, you're able to support yourself, and you have transitional housing that you can move into. So I
Mhm.
moved into a place called Emmaus House, which is
Mhm.
um, kind of like halfway houses kind of things, but you have to be sober for 6 months to move into them. Another fantastic place that I love to support now.
Mhm.
Um, and I moved into there in a house with like maybe 10 or 11 other men in recovery, and you're
Wow.
still required to do some meetings and things like that. And there's still
Mhm.
that fellowship and community of people that are in recovery that support each other and people to talk to. So it's a kind of a transition there. So I stayed
Mhm.
over there in a transitional housing for probably almost another year.
Wow. Okay. So I'm just kind of like in my brain chronologically doing the timeline. And so now it's like 2018 ish, maybe?
Yeah, yeah, probably. I think I was there probably until May of 2018 or something
Yeah.
like that.
Okay. And then what happened?
Well, then I moved out and got my own apartment
Uh
over
huh.
in Oakwood, and um, you know, I forgot to mention the whole like we started a running club while I was down there in Healing Transitions
Okay.
on Tuesday nights called Oak City Recovery Run Club. We would go running over in Dix Park on Tuesday afternoons. But I met some very influential people there. I met this guy named Charlie Engel, which is an ultra marathoner that's also been sober for a long time. And his son was going through the program at Healing Transitions, which is what brought him over there.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, started running with him, started doing some longer training runs with him. And um, I think I was still living at Emmaus House, and he invited me to come down and do this crazy 24-hour race called the El Zorro in Clinton, North Carolina. So, anyways, I went down there. He was like, "You could probably run 100 miles if you wanted to. You're kind of set up mentally for this stuff. You've suffered a lot in your life, but you're a good physical runner and things like that." And I was like, "Okay, I'll go down there and run for a few hours and see how it went." But I went down there and ran with him, and ended up that was my first 100-mile race down there.
Okay.
That
Up
was
until that point, how long had you run? Like, how many miles had you run up until that 100 miler?
Well, I think I'd run one marathon
Yeah.
before,
Okay.
but it was mainly just a handful of 20-mile runs and things like that. I did run back after I got out of college, but it was mainly just to get rid of hangovers and feel a little bit better about myself, but nothing long distance like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. So, this Mr. Engel, he introduced you to this 100 miler.
He did, he
Okay.
did. He was down there running it with me, and it was fun. And I kind of caught the bug from then on. There were a bunch of other old kind of OG ultra marathon people that came down there and shared their stories with me
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. And I was just kind of hooked on it from then. And that's how I ended up, starting to run 100-mile races. And we went out to Utah, and I ran one out there with a bunch of other guys in recovery, and just had a fantastic time. And I'd been looking for ways of how can I get back to Healing
Okay.
Transitions. I know I do this service work. I can go down there and volunteer and stuff like that, but is there some way I can give back financially too? And I had a lot of support from this fitness fellowship that I'd also learned about at Healing Transitions called
Mhm.
F3.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of
And
that.
that was just another fantastic part of my recovery, where you work out with a group of men that are transparent, have this circle of trust at the end, and support each other and all that kind of thing. So we ended up throwing together this race in Oakwood Cemetery, which is right across the street from where I was living. And I was like, if I go out here and run these laps, will you guys give me $1 per mile or 50 cents per mile or donate this to Healing Transitions? And they were like, yeah, sure, we can do that. So I ended up going to talk to Robin, the executive director over there, and she had heard of Healing Transitions before. And I just went in her office one day, and I was like, "Look, I've got this crazy idea to run around your cemetery
Uh-huh.
for 24 hours to raise money for this thing." And luckily enough, she was like, "Sure, you can do that." And
Yeah.
so we did that the first year, and that was the first Oakwood 24. We threw it together kind of, I'd say 14, 15 days in advance.
Mhm.
And I had a lot of support from the F3 guys, and I think we raised like 30 or $40,000 that first year. And a lot of it was pledges per mile. Like guys will give you $5 a mile. So I ended up running a little over 100 miles
Right.
that year, and that's kind of what kicked it all off.
Okay. What was that, like 2019, 2018? When was that?
I think that was December of 2018. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that's how Oakwood 24 came to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so
That's how it
cool.
started.
And so fast forward, I know that you've done this now, it seems like yearly.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about Oakwood 24.
This will be year 7 that we're going into this year. Um, but anyways, yeah, it's turned into just a fantastic community events that people come out. You can run, you can walk, you can bike, you can do kind of anything that you want. You don't have to do anything. We also have
Mhm.
like a bonfire out there and music and things like that. But it's in historic Oakwood Cemetery in Oakwood. And we just do a small, like, it's usually, I change the course a little bit every year, but it's somewhere between 2 and 3 mile loop course through this cemetery.
Okay.
And people come out there and run and support healing transitions, and we get corporate sponsors and
Yep.
just have a fun time of it. It's always in late December, usually just before Christmas, and we just have a fun time out there.
Yeah.
So
So you've raised a lot of money for healing transitions. This past year, how much did Oakwood 24 raise?
yeah, I think
Hmm.
we came over just over 270,000 this past year, and
That's incredible.
um, we're probably well over 500,000. I'd say we're probably 700,000 throughout the life of the event now. And it's just kind of grown a little bit every year. We
Yeah.
we get more and more people
Yeah.
involved, and recurring donations and things like that. So we've gotten a lot of different companies involved and a lot of
Mhm.
support. We've gotten Maggie Kane from Place at the Table that comes out and walks every year for 24 hours, and Brad Turlington, and now Chris Butnick, the executive director of Healing Transitions. He comes out every year and does the whole 24 hours walking. And
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
So a lot of people, it sounds you're just naming names of people in the Raleigh community that already give back. And now they're just doing an extension of that through Oakwood 24. That's really cool.
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so what kind of what kind of advice would you give to, let's just say, a teenager or somebody in their young 20s who is just, headed down this path, something similar, a path that you went down? I mean, what would you say to them at this point? Is there anything that somebody with experience can say to somebody like that? Um,
Yeah, it's hard for me to say that because looking back, I had a lot of people try to tell me
yeah.
things, and I think that's just part of youth. Is like, I'm different from that person, or they don't really know me, or things like that, and you kind of just dismiss things like that at that young age. But I think the biggest part of all of it is just asking for help. That's what kept me out of recovery for a long time, and it
Mm,
seems to keep a lot of other people out. Is that admission that, hey, I have an issue with this and I need help.
right.
And it seems like a lot of males are raised that way. I certainly was. Had this kind of fear of telling people like, hey, this is what's really going on with me. I need help with this. And as
Hmm.
soon as you can kind of surrender that and say, you know, I don't know what's happening with me. I don't know what's going on, but I need help from someone. And you can be transparent with someone like that. Um, that's the first step to it all. And that'll give you a lot of hope. And it's like this huge weight off your shoulders when you can finally come out and tell somebody that, hey, I've been drinking like this every day. I have all these weird thoughts in my head and I need help with this. So that's my biggest thing is don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to tell the truth of what's actually going on in your life.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I think, within a lot of cultures, but also I think, maybe I'm stereotyping here, but gender specific. I think men oftentimes have a hard time admitting they need help, getting vulnerable. There's a lot of shame and guilt around that. And then it's also perceived as weakness if they
Mhm.
ask for help. What do you think was inside of your core that you finally said, I have to ask for help?
Well, I think to me it was just kind of a matter of life or death at that point, and that's what it takes for some people. I was a
Mm,
very stubborn, hard-headed person that I wasn't going to admit that I needed help until I was really beat down. And everybody has a different story. Some people it doesn't take that far, or some people
mm,
have people that can kind of coax it out of them. But I'd never been surrounded by a group of men or people in recovery And I think that a lot of it was just from hiding all that stuff for years and years. It's like, nobody really needs to know how much I'm doing or what I'm doing and that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
um, you tend to kind of cover up all this stuff. So to
Yeah.
actually come clean with people, and I'd done that a few times when I was like really drunk or really high, and then I would wake up the next day and somebody would tell me what I told them. I was like, oh no, it's not that bad, kind of thing. But once I surrounded myself with people in recovery that I could be truthful with, and a lot of it was hearing other people's stories too. Once you get into AA, it's like, hey, that guy did the exact same thing I was doing. You
Right.
realize how similar everyone is in recovery. And it's like, I can relate to that guy. There might be minor differences in geologically where we were, but we were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And we're kind of the same person trying to dig our way out of it.
Yeah. Well, like you said earlier, we're not that different. I think society a lot of times wants to, divide people and separate them into different pockets, but really we're all human and we're not that different.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, there's stuff about that in some of the AA books about how, alcoholism doesn't discriminate, drugs don't discriminate, it's in every facet of society. And once you get into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, even, I've been lucky enough to travel a lot and go to different Alcoholics Anonymous meetings all over the place. And you realize that everybody's just kind of the same, and you feel at home when you walk in the
Mhm.
rooms because
Mhm.
everybody has that kind of um, common core thing going on that
Yeah.
they're just trying to deal with their alcoholism. And people need that recovery on a daily basis, and they need that fellowship and that community.
Mhm. So you've certainly turned your life around. You got married, you have a little one. That's so exciting.
Yeah, I did. I've been lucky enough. I got married in sobriety um, to my wonderful wife Jackie. I have a little 2-year old, 2.5-year old named Alex. It's been great. Been lucky enough to kind of expand my event company into other events. I have the MST endurance races that I do is another 100-mile ultra marathon right near here at Falls Lake. I also do some shorter trail races around the
Mm.
community too that all benefit Haven House, and MST race benefits Friends of the Mountains Sea Trail. So we don't really make any money off these races. We just cover expenses
Right.
and donate most of it back to local nonprofits.
That's wonderful.
Um,
Yeah.
but also my day-to-day job, I've been lucky enough to, become a co-owner in a stormwater management company here in Raleigh, and things have really turned around for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. We're glad to hear it. We're happy for you that you're able to turn your life around. Do you see yourself as lucky? Do you think this was some sort of divine intervention? I mean, who or what do you give credit to this?
I don't know. I didn't really have a concept of a higher power back when I was using, and I still now I have this kind of spiritual higher power that I believe in. That's not based roughly on any kind of religious things, just kind of a spiritual experience. And I really think it took what I went through to become the person that I am
Mhm.
today. And I can't say I want to go back and change things because it just had to be the way it was. And I went through a lot of struggles and things to get where I am today. But that also makes me be able to relate to a lot of people
Yeah.
that some other people can't, because I've
Mhm.
been through all that kind of stuff. It makes me grateful for where I am today. So that's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
took what it did. So.
Yeah. If you could leave any audience member listening that might be struggling with some piece of advice or encouragement, what would you say to that person?
Yeah, well, I always like to harp on all this stuff is involved. It's revolves around action. It's kind of asking for help, making a decision. Nobody's going to do this stuff for you. I
Mm.
was one of those people that always put things off. Like, I'm going to get help from alcoholism later. I'm going to make that change in my life, but it's always tomorrow. It's
Mm.
always in the future. And people, including myself, procrastinate like that for years until it turns into a big issue, like it did for me. So my biggest advice is it's all based around action. If you want to do something, you need to make that decision now, and you need to just go for it.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story. If you're listening and want to learn more about Oakwood 24, where can they go to find more information on that?
Yeah, so you can just Google Oakwood 24 Healing Transitions and it'll come up with an event page. And we don't have the date set for this December, but we should soon on, it'll probably be the third weekend in December and
Okay.
things like that. So if you want any information on any of those races, you can Google MST Endurance Race and Fry Health 24, any of our events, and you'll find them.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And thanks so much for tuning in and listening today.